Most places will just have a dry day with some sunny spells in the east. Temperatures a little higher, up to maybe 20 Celsius. Generally elsewhere, though, we are still only in the mid-teens. And with a fair few more showers to come in during Saturday evening across parts of Scotland, a bit more coming into Northern Ireland too as we go through the night. And we'll keep a lot of cloud, I suspect, moving back in during Saturday night and into Sunday. Some showers around on Sunday, again mostly in the north and the west, with the southeast probably staying dry and feeling a bit warmer by then too.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome to Friday's edition of On the Money, where, of course, we're focused on the UK's cost of living crisis, helping you beat the squeeze. I'm Liam Halligan, and for the next hour, we're discussing UK consumer sentiment. Because while retail sales are up on new figures announced today, consumer confidence is at an almost 50-year low. Plus, financial markets have been losing ground. Could we see a sudden collapse? What would it mean if that happened? Not least for the majority of us who don't own stocks and shares. All that, plus the craziest in-depth Money Talks interview I've ever conducted. On the Money, after the GB News headlines with Rhiannon Jones.
Thank you, Liam. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 1. Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. Senior figures involved in Downing Street parties held during lockdown could be named in Sue Gray's report. It's understood those impacted will be contacted over the weekend and given a chance to respond before the publication is due to come out in the coming days. Boris Johnson has vowed to shake up Number 10 over the COVID-breaching gatherings. It's after the 4-month-long Met Police inquiry closed yesterday. Brexit Minister Jacob Rees-Mogg doesn't think these are resigning matters and that people make mistakes.
The rules were as they were, but looking back at it, and I think this is a very important part for the inquiry to play, we need to think whether those laws that stop people comforting the dying were ever right. And I hope the inquiry will look at that in case we ever have another pandemic. How proportionate were the rules and how far should the state go in controlling what people do?
Ukraine's Azov regiment says they've been issued a military command to stop defending the city of Mariupol. The volunteer brigade, affiliated with the far right, says civilians and heavily wounded defenders have been evacuated. city's Azovstal steel plant, and that dead bodies are still being removed. Moscow reports almost 2,000 Ukrainian fighters have now surrendered. Some of them have arrived in a Russian-controlled town near Donetsk. Meanwhile, President Volodymyr Zelensky says the Donbass region's being completely destroyed by Russian forces.
The armed forces of Ukraine continue advancing to liberate the Kharkiv region. But in Donbass, the occupiers are trying to exert even more pressure. It is a hell there, and it is not an exaggeration. The brutal and absolutely senseless bombardment of Severodonetsk. There were 12 killed and dozens wounded in just one day.
Well, the UK has delivered more than 11 million items of medical aid to Ukraine since the invasion began. Health Secretary Sajid Javid says Russia's so far attacked around 200 health facilities in the country.
Today that we have delivered over 11 million medical items supporting Ukrainians with life-saving treatments, with new drugs, with intensive care equipment, which has helped save the lives of thousands of Ukrainians. We will continue to provide whatever support that we can to our friends in Ukraine, including this life-saving medical support.
11 new cases of monkeypox have been confirmed in the UK, taking the total here to 20. Sajid Javid says he's updated G7 health ministers on what's known about the spread of the disease. The health secretary said most cases are mild and that the UK has secured vaccines effective against the disease. Monkeypox is usually found in West Africa, which is why outbreaks across the rest of the world have caused alarm. The US House Speaker is deeply concerned the UK government seeking to discard the Northern Ireland Protocol. Nancy Pelosi says Congress won't support a free trade agreement with the UK if it undermines the Good Friday Agreement. The Congresswoman said ensuring there's no physical border between Ireland and Northern Ireland is absolutely necessary to uphold peace. The Chancellor and his wife have made the Sunday Times rich list for the first time as Russian billionaires tumble down the rankings. Rishi Sunak and Akshata Murthy have been ranked at 222 on the list, with their joint £730 million fortune. The couple's finances have come under scrutiny in recent months. It was estimated Ms Murthy's non-dom status could have saved her £20 million in taxes. The UK's retail sector saw a 1.4% rise in sales in April. That's according to the Office for National Statistics. That follows a drop of 1.2% in March. Sales of alcohol, tobacco and summer clothes drove the increase. That's despite many shops being forced to put their prices up. And 8 new cities have been created as part of the celebrations for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee taking place in 2 weeks' time. The Cabinet Office announced the capital of the Falkland Islands, Stanley, is one of them, alongside Douglas on the Isle of Man, Bangor in Northern Ireland, Dunfermline in Scotland, Wrexham in Wales, Colchester, Doncaster and Milton Keynes in England. Brexit Minister Jacob Rees-Mogg says the new city status has been awarded on merit and not on size. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Liam with On the Money.
And coming up on The Money today, retail sales are up, but sales of big-ticket items like furniture and fridges are slowing, and consumer confidence is at an almost 50-year low. Plus, financial markets have also been losing ground. It's the confidence thing again, as inflation builds around the world and the global economy slows. Could we see a sudden collapse? What would that mean if it happened? Not least for the majority of us who don't own stocks and shares. Plus, each day on The Money features an in-depth Money Talks interview. Today we meet Tim Slee, a Cornish-bred, London-based entrepreneur, taking London dining literally to new heights. Tim told me what it's like running one of the London's most thrilling experiences and how his business survived the COVID pandemic, having launched just a year before. That's later in the show. And as ever, I want your questions, opinions, ideas. What do you think of the issues raised in today's On the Money? How do they impact you? Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @gbnews. I'll be reading some of your messages later in the show, so stay with us because this is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan and you're on The Money. Now, UK retail sales unexpectedly rose in April, with the quantity of goods bought up 1.4%, partially reversing declines in both February and March. While this sounds like good news, and it is a sign of economic life, the fine print suggests that something else is going on. The retail sales drive was driven partly by much higher food and alcohol sales at supermarkets, as shoppers took the cheap option of getting together at home rather than going out. Spending in restaurants, bars and pubs, incidentally, isn't included in these better retail sales numbers. Sales of washing machines, fridges, furniture and other big-ticket items, meanwhile, slowed, as did spending on DIY, as households tried to save cash. And while clothing sales had a strong month, especially online, with some retailers suggesting that clothes were being bought for post-pandemic holidays and weddings, total clothing sales are still well below where they were in 2019, prior to any lockdown. While retail sales were up in April then, as inflation takes hold and the cost of living squeeze gets tighter, consumer confidence this month, May, has plunged to its lowest level in almost half a century, according to one closely watched measure of economic sentiment. This time last year, May 2021, the GfK Consumer Barometer, measuring the balance of optimistic and pessimistic shoppers, was at -8, a bit gloomy, but nothing too unusual. This month, that measure's plunged to -40. It's the lowest since the GfK index began in the mid-1970s, and lower even than in July 2008, the epicenter of the global financial crisis, when the GfK index hit -39. So consumer confidence on this well-respected measure is now lower than in 2008, a time when global financial markets were in turmoil, sending economic shockwaves around the world. What happens if today's combination of soaring inflation and slow growth causes another financial collapse? Something we'll be discussing later in this episode of On the Money. But for now, our focus is on consumer sentiment, given this lack of confidence both online and on the high street. And that's our On the Money question today. When will rock bottom consumer sentiment improve? As regular viewers and listeners know, what we do here on The Money is have grown-up discussions with people who know their stuff. I'm delighted to be joined by retail expert Kate Hardcastle. Plus, Tash Courtney-Smith is CEO and founder of Bolt Digital, a company which specialises in spotting digital trends. Great to have you both joining us remotely. And here in the studio, friend of the show, all-round economic expert Catherine McBride, a fellow at the Centre for Brexit Policy. Great to have you with us once again, Catherine. Kate, let's turn to you first. What do you make of these retail sale numbers? Because the headlines are they're up. We didn't expect them to be up. But if you drill down into the numbers, even before you look at the sentiment numbers, there are some pretty alarming trends.
Hi, Liam. Absolutely. The devil is always in the detail, and consumers shop emotionally, and we will have that conversation until the end of time. But what does that mean? It means that when they're aware that there are rising prices on the absolute essentials, they're going to be very careful about what they spend. We have a few million people that are absolutely choosing between heating and eating and needing choice right now. Thankfully, we're coming into a summer period, but I absolutely wave the red flag again relevant to autumn. I'm really concerned about that period because we're going to get another fuel hike, and there's going to be the challenge of heading into winter. I think we've got a few million people that absolutely are taking advantage of the fact that we don't have the lockdowns. They've had holidays that have been booked and put on for years on end, and they are going to go out there and they're going to enjoy that time. They're going to reunite with their families, but they know exactly that there's going to be then a period of having to tighten their belts even more so. And I can't help but think that autumn is going to be that real indicator of where we are. So we will always have consumers shopping emotionally. It will always be something we have to look at, as well as the data. It's almost like the emotional intelligence piece over there. And if you watch shoppers right now, they are being careful, and quite rightly so.
Tash Courtney-Smith, let's turn to you. Bolt Digital, as the name suggests, really specialises in these digital trends and online shopping. This lower consumer sentiment, we'll discuss it more in detail in a moment, but it seems to be impacting online sales too.
It definitely is. I mean, what Bolt Digital does is work with retail brands and digital-first consumer brands that are growing out their online e-commerce revenues. And as Kate put it so eloquently then, consumers are facing, it's very difficult to compare this to the global financial crisis because this is something that affects every single person. The news of electricity bills changing and food prices rising. So consumers are facing a kind of avalanche of bad news that directly impacts them and what is in their current account and within their financial spending each month in a way that hasn't really happened before. So it's quite a different period. Both retail brands, I mean, actually, it was unexpected news, I think, to see a 1.4% rise in retail spending in April. Both retail brands and online brands, many of the brands are both, they're retail with high street presences and online. All of them are finding the world is slightly more competitive, especially when they compare things to the coronavirus period, although that is not an ideal comparison because there was a whole different set of external circumstances at that point as well.
I think it's worth pointing out, Catherine, overall, in volume terms, retail sales are above pre-pandemic levels, not least with this extra rise over the last month. But consumer sentiment, the lowest since 1974, that is pretty worrying.
It's not actually that surprising, and I think that if you look at the supermarket sales, I thought it was very interesting that food is flat. It's not dropping. People are not eating, but definitely increase in both alcohol and cigarettes, which in a way are sort of discretionary spending. You know, we could probably live without both of them. I'm sorry, but I thought it was interesting that the household, the bigger ticket stuff is down. Now, that could reflect on people are unlikely to be moving house, so that people are staying put.
Yes.
Because usually if there's an increase in house sales or people are doing up their house to sell it...
That's when they buy those new furniture, the new washing machine and so on.
But there's also the problem where China is still locked down in a lot of the places that produce a lot of the things we've grown to rely on, even furniture and stuff, so that people may not be buying it because they can't, because
that's interesting.
You know, it's not here. So they'd like to get a new car, but there aren't any available at the moment. So because of the chips, and the chips mean that you're not buying other things. So it could be slightly. I know it's in the devil is in the detail, as has been said.
We've got the numbers, but we can't work out. We've got the what. We can't work out the why at this point.
But there was some good news because the pound has come up against the dollar a little bit in the last couple of days, which was looking a bit scary a few days ago. And that helps because things like oil are priced in US dollars and wheat.
So all our inputs are cheaper if the pound's a little bit stronger.
Yes, exactly.
A lot of people were worried the pound was going to go below 120 and then maybe all the way down to dollar parity.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. Kate, let's go back to you. I must admit, the On The Money team, we were thinking about how to frame the question for today's show, at the top of today's show. And we didn't want to say, why is consumer sentiment so low? Because that's obvious, because there's an inflation squeeze, a cost of living squeeze, and a lot of people are really suffering from those higher prices. So we wanted to frame it in a somewhat less pessimistic way. When will this rock bottom consumer sentiment recover? It really is a very low figure, isn't it? -40 on the highly respected GfK Consumer Confidence Barometer.
Look, Liam, confidence breeds confidence. When good news is out there, people feel good. People feel that the job market's good, that there isn't insecurity, that there's not next thing round the corner. People will spend because people are concerned that they've gone literally from having to deal with the involvement and movement from Brexit, which has affected a lot of business, straight into the pandemic, straight into the implications of the war. People are nervous. They're not quite sure what's coming next. They're hearing about fuel prices. They're not quite sure in terms of their job prospects. You've got to understand that it doesn't feel to be a great positive way out there. Just to go back to a couple of comments as well, it isn't a simple playing field to read anymore. We had a lot of people doing up their house when no one could move. 2 years ago. And if a lot of people have focused and done that, then they're just not going to be ready to spend. So that sort of constant cycle we would look at of sales isn't there anymore because people have had 2 years living their lives in very different ways. And one point I will always raise before I go, we are a nation of small businesses, and those small businesses are absolutely dependent on a buoyant economy. They absolutely live and thrive and survive on it. And it isn't just the big guys. It's absolutely about how do we get that economy buzzing again so our smaller businesses who give so much back to their local communities are going to feel more confident about making investment, because that's where we need to be.
You can't say it often enough, can you? Our small and medium-sized firms, half of our GDP or commercial activity, 2/3 of our employment, how they are feeling really does make the weather in terms of the broader economy, in my view. Tash Courtney-Smith, CEO and co-founder of Bolt Digital. I think what really strikes me about the situation we're in is that unemployment is at a record low. Stock markets, which of course are a very important barometer and cause of consumer confidence, they're close to an all-time high, if slightly off in the last few days. And still consumer sentiment is so low, despite a relative lack of unemployment, despite the lack of any big, serious correction on financial markets.
I know, and that is an interesting conundrum and juxtaposition that those things are the case. But I think if you actually look at what it boils down to, you know, as Kate put it, we've been told bad news at a consumer level, and we're being told if there's an ongoing sort of at least sort of 4 to 6 month period of more bad news with more price rises in the things that matter to individuals on a daily level. So actually individual sentiment is what is really, really low, not the broader sentiment of there are good things going on in the economy, retail sales are up, but what we're seeing is the things that hit people where it hurts, which we've all had, receiving a letter from your electricity bill saying that your electricity prices are going up 50%, almost immediately impacts everyone and makes them consider more exactly what they're going to spend money on. I think in terms of those high ticket items, it's like we'd all like a nice new washing machine, I'm sure, but people are starting to think, and you can see it, do I need one now? Probably not. Could I wait till next year? You know, yes, I can. So that's the issue that's happening, is that this is a set of events that is really hitting people at a very individual level. And until they individually start believing something more positive is afoot, then they're going to continue to make more cautious spending decisions.
Catherine, if we're looking at when consumer sentiment will start to recover from these incredible lows, and if consumer sentiment, which it is very closely linked to price rises, inflation, it seems to me, is going to get a lot worse before it gets better. It doesn't give me any pleasure to say that. Given that, if we're at 9% already on the headline number, given that if you look at the producer price index, which is the price of inputs that manufacturers and other companies have to pay in order to make the goods and services they give us. If you look at core inflation minus food and energy, that's well above 6%. If you look at these energy price caps in October, almost everyone I know thinks it's going to go up rather than down. So this consumer sentiment number, it could get even lower, couldn't it?
Well, the funny thing about how we count the statistics is that you might find inflation starts to level off because it's not increasing on where it was. It doesn't mean it's going down, but the inflation measures increase rather than absolute numbers. Yeah. So that you might find that the actual numbers you hear each month seem to be going down, even though your costs haven't gone down. Yeah. I mean, the good news is that there is very high employment at the moment. The bad news is that there hasn't been an increase in wages yet, and obviously with inflation going up, you're actually losing money in your wage, but at least you're employed. I mean, we have had periods of like this before where there was a lot of unemployment as well, which, you know, made it doubly bad. But I think that consumer sentiment will change, as has been said. You know, confidence breeds confidence. If there's, if the Ukraine-Russia situation is resolved, then obviously that takes the heat off the wheat price and the oil price and quite a few things. If I mean, right now, we think we've got it bad, but if you look at what's happening in Sri Lanka or what's happening in Japan, there are other places in the world where they have real problems. Not that we don't have real problems, but I mean much worse problems, put it that way.
Catherine, we will carry on this discussion in future episodes. You're going to stay with us with the rest of the show. Thanks for joining me, retail expert Kate Hardcastle, and also Tash Courtney-Smith, the founder and CEO of Bolt Digital. Great to have you both with us. Have a good weekend. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Thanks to my guests today. After the break, we'll be discussing how a lack of economic confidence is also hitting financial markets. Stay with us. You're On the Money.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle, and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome back. You're on the money. It's 1:24. Now, we've been discussing UK retail sales and gloomy sentiment among shoppers. Consumer confidence here in the UK is now almost at a 50-year low. And it seems this lack of economic confidence is also hitting financial markets across the globe. In London, the FTSE 100 index of leading shares dropped by 1.9% yesterday, with the domestically focused FTSE 250 down 1.6%. The combined loss in value then of some of the UK's biggest companies from those share price drops totalled around £60 billion. In America, the S&P 500 index of leading shares, the world's most important stock index, dropped no less than 4% on Wednesday, with the index now almost 20% down since January, close to what investors call bear market territory. Well, here in the studio to discuss this, it's Paul Sedgwick, founder of Frank Investments, and Catherine McBride is still with us. Great to have both of you with me here. Paul, now, a lot of our viewers and listeners won't own stocks and shares. The majority of the British public don't own stocks and shares. But we should all care if financial markets, as we say in the lingo, correct suddenly, have a sudden drop, because that casts storm clouds off across all business, all economic activity.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely right. I mean, the performance of the stock market is a reflection of what people feel about the state of the global economy. And at the moment, as you quite rightly pointed out, global stock markets have been, particularly recently, have been under pressure. And the US one in particular for sort of most of the start.
4% in a day is a big drop.
That's a big move. It was a combination of effects, and sentiment is now getting hit pretty hard. But it was Powell's comments on Tuesday night.
So he's the head of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell.
Jerome Powell, that's right, was making comments that he would take the interest rate possibly above neutral, which actually said that they would have really contract the economy deliberately.
To really squeeze down on that inflation
rate. At the same time, you had a couple of big US consumer companies, retail companies, talking about margins. And I think this is the next concern that a lot of people are coming up with companies. You've talked about higher producer prices, input costs rising and everything else like this. Of course, if
those
companies'
profit margins get squeezed,
if they can't pass them on a lot. And that's a lot of what we're seeing at the present, is that the investors are getting concerned. Not only is the economy slowing, but some companies are talking about the fact that their margins are getting squeezed and that they can't put on prices. So analysts lower earnings forecasts, therefore you get stock markets start to weaken.
Catherine, we know that there's renewed lockdown across lots of China, obviously the world's second biggest economy. We know that the world's biggest economy, America, is now in a sharply rising interest rate cycle, which businesses don't like. It increases their borrowing costs. But I guess the question of how vulnerable financial markets are depends on how overvalued you think they are. To what extent do you think years of central banks printing money, so-called quantitative easing, has pumped up stock markets above where they really should be?
I was just going to say that. You've given me my lead in. I would like to say that this does matter to the average British person because this is your pension fund. You may not be aware of it, you may not watch it.
If you're lucky enough to have a pension fund.
Yeah, well, if you've got a pension fund, they're probably invested in the stock market. So this is actually important to you. You definitely, as has been said by Paul, that the companies are not earning as much because their input costs are going up, so that they are going to lose some earning. But for a long time, I don't think the indexes or the company prices have really matched their earnings. I think we've seen incredibly high price per earning ratios. And
so shares have been blown up beyond a level justified by their profitability.
Yes, and this...
That's called a bubble, isn't it?
Well, to a degree. It had a lot to do with the way we did quantitative easing, where we were giving money not to the general public but to the banks. A lot of it went into asset pricing. So house prices went up and share prices went up. But we've also seen a massive increase in indexed funds, index-following funds, who just buy the index, and that consequently, if they're just buying the big 100 in the FTSE or the 250 in the FTSE 250, that is pushing that up because they keep buying it. And I've always predicted
they just buy the headline stocks, in other words.
Once it starts coming down, that could get a bit messy because no one's going to put their money into an index fund if the index is falling, because that's guaranteed you're going to lose money. You're going to go back to the old stock pickers, the people who used to look at the earnings.
People go beyond the headline stocks, the so-called penny stocks.
Or not even penny stocks, but they'll be looking at earnings again. They'll really have to concentrate on who's going to go up, who's going to make money, and not just buy something because it's in the index, which for a long time that's been going on.
Paul, do you see sentiment changing? We've talked a lot about consumer sentiment on the show today, but consumer sentiment, financial sentiment, there's feedback between both of them, isn't there? If the high street isn't doing well, that can impact the stock market. If the stock market isn't doing well, then people feel less well off, investors feel less well off, firms invest less, there's less money for wage rises and so on. Where do you think we are? I mean, I must say, I've written this many, many times. I've thought for quite a few years the stock market has been really seriously overvalued. That's just a personal view. Maybe I'm just gutted I missed out on some of the upside in recent years. But it does feel to me like the stock market here in the US has been pumped up by this endless money printing.
Well, I think that, I mean, you're right to a degree. There has recently, a lot of that froth has been taken out of the stock market, particularly the US. And actually, if you believe the forecasts of analysts, which is what some people are starting to question now, US equities don't look that overvalued. And you have seen a lot of the sort of hyped-up US stocks.
They're down almost 20%, aren't they?
Well, the US market's there, but a lot of these have suffered some major corrections. And the UK index has underperformed. You were talking about the FTSE, has underperformed global indexes quite a lot. I mean, it is naturally a lot different to what it was 10 or 12 years ago. So it actually has underperformed global markets generally. But the thing about stock markets is they are to a greater degree sentiment driven. And when people start to feel confident, they go up, as you say. They tend to anticipate the change in sentiment as well. So they tend to be... So, for example, stock markets tend to bottom a year before the actual recession is sort of confirmed by economists. So I think the point is we have seen the stock market correct. It has been forecasting a degree of the slowdown. Are we getting... I mean, if one tries to look at the more positives, one could say the interest rate rise cycle might be relatively short-lived. Sentiment is extremely bearish. Valuations, I know, Catherine, they have been expensive, but they're not as expensive as they were, so that's a little bit more attractive. And interest rates are forecast to stay around 3% at the moment. So you can paint slightly. You can't be completely doomed.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to have to get you two in to carry on this discussion. It's a very, very important discussion. As I say, even if you don't own stocks and shares, where the stock market is, particularly if there's a big correction, is really important to consumer sentiment, economic sentiment, more broadly. Thanks so much to my guests today, Paul Sedgwick, founder of Frank Investments, and indeed Catherine McBride, Fellow of the Centre of Brexit Policy. Great to have you both with us. Now, this is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan, and coming up, today's Money Talks interview. It's a pretty interesting one. Stay tuned to see me interview the CEO of a British events company while suspended 100 foot over the O2 Arena in Greenwich in southeast London. All that after the GB News headlines with Rhiannon Jones.
Thank you, Liam. It's 1:33. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. Senior figures involved in Downing Street parties held during lockdown could be named in Sue Gray's report, expected to be published in the coming days. The Prime Minister has vowed to shake up Number 10 over the COVID-breaching gatherings. Brexit Minister Jacob Rees-Mogg doesn't think these are resigning matters and says that people make mistakes.
The rules were as they were. But looking back at it, and I think this is a very important part for the inquiry to play, we need to think whether those laws that stop people comforting the dying were ever right. And I hope the inquiry will look at that in case we ever have another pandemic. How proportionate were the rules and how far should the state go in controlling what people do?
Ukraine's Azov regiment says they've been issued a military command to stop defending the city of Mariupol. The volunteer brigade, affiliated with the far right, says civilians and heavily wounded defenders have been evacuated from the city's Azovstal steel plant and that dead bodies are still being removed. 11 new cases of monkeypox have been confirmed in the UK, taking the total here to 20. The Health Secretary says he's updated G7 health ministers on what's known about the spread of the disease. Sajid Javid says most cases are mild and that the UK has secured vaccines effective against the virus. And celebrity chef Jamie Oliver is leading a protest at Downing Street over the delay in new junk food laws. An overhaul to buy one, get one free promotions in supermarkets was due to go ahead this year, but has been pushed back to October 2023. Tesco and Sainsbury's say, though, that they're committed to the original government deadlines. TV Online and DAB Plus Radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound is 1.247 to the dollar. The pound is 1.179 to the euro. And the price of gold currently stands at £1,477.79 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for real-time investment.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity. That's the question. That's two questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome back. You're on the money. It's 1:37. Now, Prince Charles and Camilla have returned from their trip to Canada, which they embarked on to mark Her Majesty the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, of course, 70 years on the throne. But before the couple departed from Canada, they spoke with a maple syrup business owner who suffered financial losses during the pandemic. Well, our GB News Raw reporter Cameron Walker was travelling with the royal party.
The Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall are big supporters of the High Street in Britain, but this week they have been on a royal tour of Canada and visited Bywood Market yesterday here in Ottawa, in the country's capital, and they visited this store here, Maple Country, and I'm going to be speaking to the owner, Ross. Now, Ross, how was the visit yesterday?
It was lovely. We met Prince Charles, and he was very, very pleasant. Visited many different locations. And the weather was great too, so ended up being perfect.
Tell me about the kind of products you sell here.
So I sell maple syrup and virtually anything maple related. We have maple sugar, maple butter, hard candies, all kinds of little snacks here. We have the cookies and the tea and maple toffee.
Oh, amazing. And how did the pandemic affect local businesses like yours?
Well, the big issue was the lack of tourism. Tourism somewhat dropped off entirely, and the locals still did come, but they were buying more bigger quantities. It was always hard to read whether we were in lockdown or not. We never closed even once, but when the surrounding area is completely locked down, and being mostly restaurants, some places were not allowed to serve food unless it was for takeout, so it hurt for sure.
I bet. And hospitality and business since the pandemic, has it picked up at all?
It's been steadily climbing. It's been coming back. It's still very expensive to travel right now, though, so we're still lacking on tourism. But they're slowly coming back, too. It's just a matter of time.
And the Prince of Wales and Duchess of Cornwall, like you mentioned, came to your stall yesterday. Did they say anything to you? What did they say?
Well, they were asking about whether it was the maple season and how everything was and how business was. They were very, very pleasant. They were somewhat in a rush, though. It's a tight itinerary, so they had many places to visit and lots of places to see. So.
And how important are visits, like high-profile visits like theirs? Do you think it, creates a bigger profile for businesses such as yourself?
Oh, for sure. It definitely it's great advertising, to be honest, and it also shows a lot of the locals that we are still open, we're still here, and we're waiting for them.
Well, Ross, best of luck for your business. Thank you very much for speaking to GB News.
Thank you very much.
Well, the Prince of Wales and Duchess of Cornwall's visit here perhaps has raised the profile of several of the local businesses, and no doubt since, after the pandemic, it's going to be a very good thing for businesses and profits.
Cameron Walker there, GB News Royal Reporter Extraordinaire. And it's time now for my daily interview series, Money Talks. Now, if you don't like heights, you might want to give this one a miss. Look away now, as they say when they're announcing the football results. Because today, I'm showing my interview with the CEO of Events in the Sky, Tim Slee. In all my years as a journalist, I have to say, the interview you're about to see is right up there with my craziest ever, because Tim and I chatted while suspended high in the air, dangling from a massive crane next to the O2 Arena in East London, what used to be called the Millennium Dome. Tim has a background in media ownership, having founded some of the UK's best-known magazines and websites over the last 20 years, including Square Mile and Escapism magazines. In 2019, though, he created Events in the Sky, offering everything from breakfast to cocktail parties and live music, all suspended from a crane. And this week marks the post-pandemic launch of Events in the Sky. So here he is, Cornish entrepreneur Tim Slee, my latest guest on Money Talks. Tim, we're above the skyline in London. It's the O2 behind us. How did this happen?
Well, we've spent the last 2 weeks building it here, and the weather's come out, and you're one of the first people up here, Liam.
So you founded this business, London in the Sky. This is your relaunch after lockdown, if you like. What is it that you're trying to achieve here by the O2 Centre in the heart of London?
Well, to give everybody a very nice time, first of all, and it's a spectacular setting for it. So we could be anywhere, but this feels like one of the best places that we could rock up. And yeah, we're here for the whole summer now.
So tell me about the business. What is the service that you're offering? We're not just up here for a chat, are we? I mean, there's a lot more to London in the Sky than that.
Well, yes and no. Mainly we're offering good times for everybody who turns up, and it's a lot of the people are here for that. So they're here for celebrating birthdays or events, or it could be a work thing, it could be corporates, and it's a special and very unique thing.
I have to say, we are really quite a long way above ground. I'm not usually scared of heights, but I feel excited rather than petrified, though
good. It
could go either way.
That's a good thing, yeah. It's certainly, even for me, this is my first time up here this summer.
It's pulse racing, isn't it?
Yeah, I haven't looked down fully yet, but it doesn't look so high from the ground, but up here, yeah. Even though I've been on lots of times, it's the first time this year, and it can still get you.
Well, people listening to this and watching this on the television, let's get to the first things they'll be thinking about, the safety issues. Now, I am strapped in here. I've got 3 straps across me. I couldn't get out even if I wanted to. I think that's the point. Everyone who's aboard at the moment, we got chefs, we got obviously my camera crew and colleagues and so on. Everyone's on a kind of safety chain, aren't they? But you're obviously a very persuasive guy, Tim. How did you convince the authorities, the health and safety crowd, that this was going to be okay?
Sure, well, you're right. Safety is one of the most important things. It's there's a lot more to think about than a normal restaurant, and you're right. So you've got the safety of the people strapping in, and then before we came up, there was a safety speech, and
Indeed.
You've got the safety not just of us on the table, but of everybody below. So you'll have noticed that when we came up, there was a big safety zone beforehand. So one of the questions we get asked by everybody is, do you ever drop anything? Well, the answer is yes, that does happen over the summer. It doesn't end up in the same state as what it was on the table, but when it lands. But luckily, due to a large safety area beneath, then that's exactly where it goes. And all the regulations, then we work with a company in Belgium who they actually came up with the concept. So they design the tables, they design the hardware, and they make sure it goes through all the compliance, and they do a lot of that for us, and then we link in with them. So very, very safe setup. It's in over 60 countries in the world. We have the rights to the UK and Ireland, and we pop up all over the UK, but predominantly we choose to be here at the O2 in London.
Tell me what you're doing before, because I know your name. You were a media guy. You were launching magazines, and quite successfully, if I may say so. Tell us a little bit about your media career and how you segued into this.
Sure, yes. I think whatever I did before this, however you segue into this, it's going to be a strange one, right? So, media was my first career, and for 18 years, launching various different magazines, from magazines for the finance and the city world through to food, drink, travel. And actually, it's not too much of a stretch from that world, because with media often comes events, and one of the events that we saw was at the time what was known as Dinner in the Sky, and it was very much a corporate event on a much smaller scale. It was in London for maybe 10, 12 days a year, and it would pop up at various other things for corporate entertaining, really. And we saw the opportunity to acquire the business, and just before COVID in 2019, it was the perfect business really to be able to introduce to social media and to grow and to make it something more for the everyday consumer as opposed to just for the corporate world.
I guess there are crossovers with the media, because you're building a brand here. It's about getting the word out. It's about marketing advertising and so on, things that you're pretty well versed in.
Yeah, so it's the best word of mouth business that you can get, really, and it hadn't been doing much of shouting about itself. Word of mouth, it lived exclusively off, but there was no real social media presence. Website wasn't great. The operation was still good, but we thought we could bring it a bit more into...
A bit of media savvy into what was operationally and practically a good business.
Sure, so we've got big spends on social. We spend hundreds of thousands of pounds on social media advertising, and that's where predominantly all of our tickets come from, and we introduced a PR company to it. We have lots of chats with the media, and we invite lots of different people down, lots of reality TV shows, all sorts of things, anything to make sure that we're getting the name out and we're seen, and seems to have a massive effect. If we have influencers or any media up here, it seems to generate huge views. It's a weird concept.
Oh my God, look at this kind of a business, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not the... Me and you can be talking like this now, but you forget that we are actually...
I just dangled my foot over the side and sort of waving around.
We've got nothing beneath our feet.
Feels quite weird.
Yeah.
So you started in 2019, you didn't know the pandemic was coming. Obviously, that must have been quite a blow. Did you have any moments where you lost heart? I mean, you must have been just... In terms of this business, I know you've got lots of other business interests, but this must have been on ice for quite a long time.
Exactly that, yeah. So in 2019, we had our summer season, finished in July, and it was a great season, and it was really a proof of concept for this. We were at the O2 again, and it was super successful season. We had signed with the O2 to be here for the next few years. We'd had sponsors come on board after being smaller sponsors in the first year, commit to wanting to be headline sponsors, and big kind of 6-7 figure contracts almost.
Wow.
And all of that fell out of bed as a result of it. And I mean, it was one of those things. We were lucky because it's a small team. It feels like it's a big operation here because there's lots of staff, but we're hiring in staff.
That was Tim Slee, the CEO of Events in the Sky. I'm afraid we're coming out of that interview early because we're about to cross over to Prime Minister Boris Johnson, but you can listen to the full-strength version of that interview with Tim Slee on my Money Talks podcast on the GB News YouTube channel. But for now, let's go over to Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, who's speaking in Wales to the Welsh Conservative Party conference.
And this Conservative government is getting on with taking the big decisions, the tough decisions and the right decisions to take this country forward at home and abroad. The Welsh people, apart from everybody else, asked us to deliver Brexit, and we did. The British people asked to be protected from COVID, and we rolled out vaccines faster than any other European country. The Ukrainian people needed our help to protect them against the vicious aggression of Vladimir Putin. And we were the first European country to send those heroic Ukrainians the assistance they needed. And they have been incredible. They have repelled Putin from the gates of Kiev. And just as we got the most difficult challenges of COVID right and got the big calls right, we will get this country through the big the big challenges now and the post-COVID aftershocks. The pressures are caused in particular by the rise in the cost of living. Everybody can see what's happening, the cost at fuel pumps, the price of food, cost of energy. We all know how tough it is. And how tough it can be. And as with COVID, we see the same waves, the same problems around the world, in America, in Europe, in Australia. And we can see the causes as clear as day. First, the disruption in supply chains and the sudden demand for oil and gas as the global economy came out of COVID, and then a new surge in prices caused by Putin's aggression. The surge in the price of oil and gas now as the world struggles to end its addiction to Russian hydrocarbons. The surge in the price of food. 25 million tons of grain. Grain the world desperately needs. Still locked up in silos in Odessa because the Black Sea is now littered with mines. And of course, we're going to get through this, and the markets will eventually adjust, and new supply will come on, and prices will come down again. And in the months ahead, we are going to have to do what we did before. We're going to use our fiscal firepower that we built up, that we have, to help. We're going to put our arms around the British people, again, as we did during COVID. And never forget, there's only one reason why we were able to afford furlough and all the £400 billion worth of support. And that was because we Conservatives had managed the economy sensibly and responsibly. And there's only one reason now why our economy is strong enough to continue to help, and that is because we took the tough decisions and got the big calls right when, by the way, Labour was telling us to stay in lockdown. And Mark Drakeford, I think, actually criminalised people for going into the office, didn't he? Labour's tells you all you need to know. Remember Captain Hindsight telling us it was reckless to open up the economy in July last year? Well, we ignored him. And were we right? Yeah. Just as we ignored Labour over Christmas and New Year. And that's why, because we took those tough decisions, youth unemployment is at or near a record low. We have 500,000 more people in payroll employment than before the pandemic. And our economy is now bigger than before COVID. And at the same time, as we use our economic strength that we've built up to help people through the post-COVID aftershocks, we're going to do the necessary thing. We're going to fix the underlying problems, just as we did with COVID. Remember, while Labour vacillated, we vaccinated. And let me ask you, where was that? Who was vaccinated with AstraZeneca, by the way? Fantastic. Good for you. So was I. Let me ask you where that precious fluid was bottled. Close. Who said Macclesfield? Graham. Macclesfield is only partly right. Millions and millions of doses were produced in Wales, in Wrexham. In Wrexham, by the way, that is now represented by a Conservative MP for the first time, not in a generation, but for the first time since 1935. Wrexham that now has a state-of-the-art vaccine manufacturing plant, Wockhart, because the motto of the family is Walk Hart. They believe in Heart Walk. That would have been unimaginable 25 years ago when I first campaigned in the adjacent seat. And by the way, that seat too now has a Conservative member of Parliament. And the same Wrexham that today I think we can announce, or maybe it was yesterday, I can't remember, Her Majesty has now accorded the status of a city for her Jubilee year. And Wales will be at the heart of our mission now to fix the underlying issues in our energy market, all the things that previous governments have failed to address. Wales, with its boundless potential for clean energy of every kind, we're massively accelerating our programme of offshore wind, and particularly off the coast of South Wales. We're putting in now, we've announced today, another £160 million worth of investment into port facilities that will enable the companies to come and install and build the turbines that we need, so that we can take our offshore wind capacity. I mean, we're already the Saudi Arabia of wind, but we're going to take it from 11 gigawatts now to 50 gigawatts of wind by 2030. That's 50 gigawatts from offshore wind. That's half the total electricity consumption of the UK. And Wales, with its nuclear heritage and potential squandered under Labour, which we're now reviving, with a new reactor every year rather than every decade. Not just in Wilford, I can see Atomic Kitten there in the front row. But today I can tell you that we're looking to build another small modular reactor on the site at Trustfinith. Did Simon say that already? I couldn't. I hope this is news to you, but I think it's fantastic news. And that is how. It's by investing in nuclear. By the way, 50 gigawatts of offshore wind, 25 gigawatts of nuclear. That's how we will make sure that we have the base load, not just for British households, for people who are feeling the pinch, make sure we don't have this problem again, but for our industry, for our businesses, from Welsh steel to the Welsh aircraft manufacturing that makes half the wings of all the passenger jets in the world. I think Simon may well have said that, but it's worth saying again. To the electric heaters warming the lambing sheds of Wales. They probably stopped warming the lambing sheds of Wales now, but they still agriculture needs energy. Welsh business needs energy, and we will provide and the whole, not just Wales, but the whole country with long-term, low-carbon, secure and dependable supply. And the reason we're going ahead at this scale and at this pace is that, as I say, this government takes the big decisions, the tough decisions that have been shirked for a generation. And never forget, the reason why we're in the position we are is because it was a Labour Party in 1997, before their 13 years in power, who said there was no case, no economic case for more nuclear power, with their characteristic prescience. Remind them of that every time they complain about energy shortages and energy prices in our country. My friends, let us get on with the job, uniting and levelling up across Wales and across the whole country, with investment in roads and rail across the north of Wales, throughout the country, gigabit broadband. I think I heard Simon mention that, gigabit broadband, which is of such value to communities, particularly remote rural communities. Those infrastructure investments are helping to drive jobs and growth across the economy. It is a massive and exciting agenda for change. Infrastructure, skills, technology. That is how we are going to transform our country and make it fit for the future. And can I just ask you, do you think at this juncture, when Putin is muttering recklessly about using his nuclear arsenal, do we really want our defence policy handed over to a bunch of semi-repentant Corbynista loons, to put it mildly? Never forget, 8 of the shadow front bench, including the shadow foreign secretary, voted to scrap this country's independent nuclear deterrent. Is that the right thing for our country now? Is that the right thing for NATO now? Is that the right thing for the world, for Ukraine? Absolutely not. Do we want Labour running the economy when there has never, when all they ever want to do is rack up taxation and spending, when there has never been a Labour government that left with unemployment lower than when they came in? No, we certainly don't. This is the government that is delivering record low unemployment and growth and jobs. I want to thank all of you for everything that you're doing to campaign in Wales. Thank you for all your wonderful, wonderful energy and your support. Thank you, Andrew RT, who seems to have been, where's Andrew RT? Thank you, Andrew RT, for all your heroic work. You seem to have issued some major policy pronouncements today. I salute your campaign for St. David's Day. I don't know what we'll do with it, but I definitely salute it. I salute your ambition to get more investment in infrastructure in Wales, and we will, Andrew. We will. Because I like and approve of the energy and ambition that you have and that Conservatives have for Wales, and you are absolutely right. We want to take Wales forward, and we want to take Britain forward together, using our strong economy to help the whole country through the COVID aftershocks, and taking the big decisions now that will deliver a prosperous and dynamic UK in the decades to come. Thank you all very much for your time, and have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you. That's Prime Minister Boris Johnson addressing the party faithful at Newtown in Paris for the Conservative Welsh Party Conference 2022. We're going to be reviewing it all next. Hello and welcome to We Need to Talk About on GB News with me, Alex Phillips, where we get stuck